9-year-old Keisha Brooks sat curled up in the corner of the tiny escape pod, her dark eyes wide with fear as she stared out the small window at the swirling colors of space. 3 days had passed since everything went wrong. 3 whole days since the big colony ship called New Dawn had been ripped apart by something her mom called a hyperspace storm. The grown-ups had been so excited about finding a new home planet. Keisha remembered how her dad, Jerome, had lifted her up to see the star charts, pointing at their destination with his calloused finger. "That's where we're going, baby girl," he had said with his warm smile. "Our new home among the stars." But now Dad was gone. Mom was gone. Everyone was gone except for Keisha and this scary metal box that kept her alive with its recycled air and emergency food bars that tasted like cardboard. The computer kept beeping with red warnings that hurt her ears. She couldn't read all the big words, but she understood the pictures well enough. The pod was falling toward a planet and the computer really didn't want to go there. Words like danger and forbidden kept flashing on the screen in angry red letters. Keisha pulled her grandmother's quilt tighter around her shoulders. Grandma Rosie had sewn it herself, with patches from old clothes that told the story of their family. There was a piece from her great-grandfather's work shirt, fabric from her mom's wedding dress, and a square cut from the blanket Keisha had as a baby. It smelled like home and made her feel a little less afraid. The pod shook violently as it hit the planet's atmosphere. Keisha squeezed her eyes shut and held onto her stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, as the world spun around her. She could hear metal creaking and groaning like the old pipes in their apartment back on Earth. Then came a terrible crash that threw her against the wall, and everything went quiet. For a long moment, Keisha didn't move. Her head hurt, and she could taste blood from where she had bitten her tongue. But she was alive. The pod's emergency lights cast everything in a spooky red glow, and she could hear a hissing sound that meant the air was leaking out somewhere. She pressed the button that opened the pod door, just like the safety videos had taught her. Cool air rushed in, carrying strange smells of flowers and something that reminded her of her mom's rock collection. The world outside was beautiful in a way that took her breath away. Everything seemed to be made of crystal. Trees that looked like they were carved from colored glass stretched up toward a purple sky. The ground sparkled with tiny gems, and water trickled somewhere nearby with a sound like wind chimes. It was pretty, but it was also completely alien and very, very quiet. Keisha climbed out of the broken pod, her sneakers crunching on crystal gravel. She was in some kind of cave or tunnel, but it was huge. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above her head, and the walls curved away into shadows on both sides. Her small emergency flashlight made dancing patterns on the crystal surfaces, like being inside a giant diamond. That's when she heard it. Breathing. Not the quick, shallow breathing of a scared little girl, but something slow and deep and powerful. Each breath sounded like ocean waves, but with a rumbling underneath that she could feel in her bones. The sound was coming from deeper in the cave, where her flashlight couldn't reach. Keisha knew she should be terrified. Every instinct told her to run back to the pod and hide. But curiosity had always been stronger than fear for her. Besides, where could she run to? This strange crystal world was all she had now. She took a step forward, then another. "Hello," she called out, her voice small and echoing in the vast space. "Is someone there?" The breathing stopped. Then from the darkness ahead, 2 enormous eyes opened. They glowed like melted gold, each one bigger than Keisha's entire body. They studied her with an intelligence that was ancient and careful and completely alien. A voice spoke from the shadows, deep as thunder but somehow gentle. "Little human child. You are very far from home." Keisha looked up at those massive golden eyes and felt something unexpected. Not fear but recognition. Like meeting someone she'd been looking for her whole life without knowing it. "Yes, sir," she said politely, the way Grandma Rosie had taught her. "I got lost. Are you lost too?" The massive creature stepped into the light, and Keisha's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen anything so incredible in her entire life. The dragon was enormous, easily the size of 3 school buses lined up together, covered in scales that shifted from deep black to midnight blue as he moved. Steam curled from his nostrils, and when he breathed, the crystal walls around them seemed to hum with a musical sound. But what surprised Keisha most was that she wasn't scared. Maybe she should have been, but looking into those ancient golden eyes, all she felt was a deep sadness that reminded her of how her dad looked when he talked about losing his own father. "Lost?" the dragon repeated, his voice like distant thunder. "I suppose I am, little one. I have been lost for a very long time." Keisha tilted her head, studying him the way she used to study the stray cats in her neighborhood before bringing them home. "What's your name?" "I am called Vorthak," he said, lowering his massive head closer to her level. And you are Keisha Brooks, age 9, from the colony ship New Dawn. I heard your distress beacon. You know my name? Keisha's eyes widened with wonder rather than fear. Your emergency pod has been broadcasting your information for 3 days, Vorthak explained gently. I know that you enjoy stories, that your favorite color is purple, and that you miss someone called Grandma Rosie very much. Tears welled up in Keisha's eyes at the mention of her grandmother. She used to tell me the best stories, especially about dragons. Vorthak's great head tilted with curiosity. What did she tell you about my kind? Keisha wiped her nose on her sleeve and sat down cross-legged on the crystal floor, as if she were getting ready for story time at school. She said dragons weren't really monsters like in the scary movies. She said they were guardians who protected special things, and that they were really lonely because people were too afraid to be their friends. For the first time in 3 centuries, Vorthak felt something crack inside his chest. Not pain, but something warm and unfamiliar. Your grandmother sounds very wise. She was the best, Keisha said, then dug around in her backpack. I only have half a peanut butter sandwich left, but you can have some if you want. I bet you're hungry too. She held out the small sandwich with such genuine kindness that Vorthak found himself at a complete loss for words. In all his long years, no creature had ever offered to share their food with him. Most beings either tried to kill him or fled in terror. I do not eat such things, young Keisha, he said softly, but your offering touches my heart in ways you cannot imagine. Over the next few days, something magical began to happen in the crystal caverns of Drakmor. Vorthak, who had lived alone for longer than most civilizations existed, started reshaping his ancient lair to accommodate one small human girl. Using careful, precise flames, he smoothed rough crystal edges that might cut her. He carved perfect little shelves where she could keep her few belongings. He heated flat stones to just the right temperature so she would stay warm at night, wrapped in her grandmother's quilt with Mr. Peanuts tucked under her arm. Keisha, meanwhile, explored the vast cavern system with the fearless curiosity that only children possess. She discovered chambers filled with crystals that sang when the wind blew through them. She found pools of warm, clean water that glowed with soft blue light. She traced the beautiful patterns carved into the walls with her small fingers, asking endless questions about what they meant. These symbols tell stories, Vorthak explained as Keisha ran her hand over particularly intricate carvings. Stories of my people, from long ago when we flew between the stars and built great cities on worlds made of crystal and song. Where are they now? Keisha asked, settling herself comfortably against Vorthak's warm side like he was a living mountain. Gone, Vorthak said simply. Wars came and fear and my people scattered to the far corners of space. I chose to remain here, guarding this place, waiting. Waiting for what? Vorthak looked down at the small girl who had somehow made herself at home in his ancient heart. I thought I was waiting to die, little one. But perhaps I was waiting for you. Each evening they would share stories. Keisha told him about Earth, about birthday parties and ice cream and the way rain sounded on her bedroom window. She taught him hand-clapping games and showed him how to make shadow puppets on the crystal walls. In return, Vorthak shared tales of distant worlds and civilizations that had risen and fallen before humans ever looked up at the stars. He told her about dragon cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants, and libraries carved into asteroids where all knowledge was kept safe. But the most important thing they shared was something neither had expected to find again: family. News traveled fast through the galaxy, especially news as shocking as this. In the military headquarters of the hegemony, a coalition of alien races that had spent decades conquering human colonies, Admiral Crix stood before a massive holographic display showing the forbidden world of Drakmor. You're telling me, Admiral Crix said, his forearms crossed skeptically, that a human child not only survived contact with Vorthak the Ancient, but has been living with him for over a week? His intelligence officer, a nervous creature named Ylox, nodded rapidly. The distress beacon transmitted for 6 full days before going silent. Our deep space monitors detected no explosion, no signs of destruction. The child's life signs simply disappeared into the dragon's lair. Admiral Crix's eyes gleamed with predatory interest. For generations, the hegemony had viewed dragons as the ultimate weapon. Creatures of such power that even their mighty fleets avoided dragon territories. But if one small human could somehow tame the legendary Vorthak. Prepare the 3rd battle fleet, he commanded. If this child has discovered a way to control dragons, we will have that knowledge. Meanwhile, on distant colony worlds, other forces were stirring. Captain Diana Torres of the Human Resistance received the same intelligence reports, but her reaction was very different. She stared at the grainy image of young Keisha Brooks that had been pulled from the New Dawn's passenger records. "That's Jerome Brooks' daughter," she whispered to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Ryan Park. "I knew her father. Good man, fought with us in the Outer Rim conflicts before he decided to try the colony life." "What are your orders, Captain?" Ryan asked. Diana's jaw tightened with determination. "We get that little girl back before the hegemony turns her into a weapon. Prep the fastest ship we have." Back in the crystal caves of Drakmor, Keisha was completely unaware of the storm brewing across the galaxy. She was too busy learning about her new home and the amazing creature who had become her protector. That morning, Vorthak had taken her to see his treasure chamber. Unlike the gold and jewels that dragons hoarded in old fairy tales, Vorthak's treasures were different. He collected memories, crystallized into beautiful geometric shapes that glowed with soft inner light. "Each one holds a story," Vorthak explained as Keisha walked among the floating crystals with wonder. "This one contains the laughter of children from a world that no longer exists. That blue one holds the first song ever sung by the melodic people of Harmony Prime." Keisha reached up to touch a crystal that pulsed with warm golden light. "What's this one?" "That," Vorthak said quietly, "holds the memory of the last time I spoke with another of my kind. 300 years ago." The sadness in his voice made Keisha's heart hurt. She had been an only child, but she'd always had family around her. She couldn't imagine being alone for so long. "Well, you're not alone anymore," she said firmly, patting his massive claw. "And maybe other dragons aren't all gone. Maybe they're just hiding like you were." Before Vorthak could respond, both of them felt it. A tremor that ran through the crystal formations around them, too regular to be natural. Then another and another. Vorthak's great head lifted, his nostrils flaring. "Ships," he growled, his voice suddenly dangerous. "Many ships approaching fast." Keisha's stomach dropped. "Are they coming to rescue me?" But even as she asked, she could see in Vorthak's ancient eyes that this wasn't a rescue mission. The way his scales seemed to darken and his claws extended told her that whoever was coming, they meant trouble. "Little one," Vorthak said, his voice gentle despite the growing tension in his massive frame, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. There are beings in this galaxy who would use you to hurt others. They see connections like ours as weakness to be exploited." Keisha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. "They want to hurt you?" "They want to control me," Vorthak corrected. "And they think that holding you will give them power over me. They are not entirely wrong." Above them, the vibrations were getting stronger. Through cracks in the crystal ceiling, Keisha could see lights moving across the purple sky. Ships, lots of them, forming a blockade around the planet. "I won't let them hurt you," Keisha said fiercely, surprising herself with how strong her voice sounded. Vorthak looked down at this brave little human who had somehow become the most precious thing in his ancient life. "And I will not let them take you. But Keisha, what comes next will be dangerous. These are not the kind people from your stories. These are predators who see kindness as something to be consumed." As if summoned by his words, a booming voice echoed from speakers on the approaching ships, amplified to carry across the crystal landscape. "Vorthak the Ancient, we know the human child is with you. Surrender her peacefully, and we will consider sparing your world." Keisha looked up at her dragon friend, seeing ancient fury building behind his golden eyes like a storm gathering strength. "They don't know you very well, do they?" she said quietly. Vorthak's lips pulled back, revealing teeth like ivory swords. "No, little one. They do not." The hegemony fleet spread across Drakmor's purple sky like a metal storm cloud. Admiral Crix stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching 300 warships take their positions around the crystal planet. Each ship bristled with weapons specifically designed to fight dragons, plasma cannons that could melt through the toughest scales, neural disruptors that could scramble even an ancient mind, and capture nets woven from quantum filaments strong enough to hold a star. "Begin Phase 1, Admiral Crix commanded, his voice cold as space. "Target the outer crystal formations. We'll smoke them out." The first barrage lit up Drakmor's sky like deadly fireworks. Plasma bolts slammed into the crystal mountains, shattering formations that had stood for millions of years. The beautiful singing crystals that Keisha loved exploded into glittering dust, their music silenced forever. Deep in the cavern, Keisha felt the planet shake beneath her feet. Dust rained from the ceiling and several of Vorthak's precious memory crystals cracked from the vibrations. The little girl pressed herself against the dragon's warm side, feeling his entire body tense with rage. "They're destroying everything," she whispered, tears streaming down her face as another explosion echoed through the caves. Vorthak's golden eyes blazed with fury older than civilizations. "Stay here, Keisha. I will end this quickly." But as he began to rise, Keisha grabbed onto one of his massive claws with both hands. "No. Don't you see? That's exactly what they want. They want you angry and not thinking straight." "They are attacking my home," Vorthak growled, smoke curling from his nostrils. "They threaten you. I cannot allow this." "I know," Keisha said, her voice surprisingly calm for a 9-year-old watching her world explode around her. "But Grandma Rosie always said that when bullies pick on you, you don't fight them the way they expect. You fight smarter." Another barrage shook the cavern, this one closer. Through the crystal walls, they could see the bright flashes of weapons fire getting nearer to their location. "What do you mean, little one?" Vorthak asked, though every instinct screamed at him to burst from the cave and burn the attackers from the sky. Keisha was already moving, running deeper into the cave system toward the chambers covered in dragon writing. "You said this place was special, right? That it was more than just your home." "Yes, but then maybe it can fight back." Vorthak's ancient mind suddenly understood what the child was suggesting. In his grief and loneliness, he had forgotten what Drakmor truly was. Not just a lair but a fortress world, one of the great dragon strongholds built when his people ruled the stars. He followed Keisha through passages that had been carved by dragon claws millennia ago, his massive form barely fitting through some of the tunnels. The little girl moved with purpose, guided by weeks of exploration and an intuition that amazed him. They reached the central chamber just as the planet shuddered from another attack. This room was different from the others, filled with devices that hummed with dormant power. The walls were covered in control panels designed for dragon claws, but there were smaller manual interfaces too, emergency backups that could be operated by more delicate appendages. "I've been studying these symbols," Keisha said, running to a console covered in glowing dragon script. "I think I can read some of them now. This one means awaken, and this one means defend." Above them, Admiral Crix was growing impatient. "Increase firepower. Target the main cavern entrance. If the dragon won't come out, we'll bring the roof down on him." The bombardment intensified, and Keisha could hear crystal formations collapsing throughout the cave system. But her small fingers were already working at the ancient controls, pressing sequences she had memorized from watching the patterns in the dragon writing. Suddenly, the humming in the chamber changed pitch. Lights that hadn't glowed for centuries began to flicker to life throughout the fortress. Deep beneath Drakmor's surface, massive generators that had slumbered since the last dragon war began to power up. On his flagship bridge, Admiral Crix watched in growing alarm as his tactical display started showing new contacts. "What is that? Are those weapon emplacements?" Across Drakmor's surface, crystal formations that had seemed like natural mountains began to unfold like deadly flowers. Beam weapons the size of skyscrapers rose from hidden base. Point defense systems that could track and destroy individual missiles came online with targeting computers that still remembered how to fight interstellar wars. But the most shocking sight was the launch bays opening in the crystal cliffs. Ancient fighter craft, sleek and deadly despite their age, burst from hidden hangars. Their dragon pilots were long dead, but their automated systems still functioned perfectly. "Impossible!" Admiral Crix shouted as his mighty fleet suddenly found itself facing a fortress world that had been playing dead for 3 centuries. "How are they controlling the planetary defenses?" In the control chamber, Keisha's hands flew over interfaces that responded to her touch like they had been waiting for her. Vorthak watched in amazement as the small human child awakened systems that he himself had forgotten existed. "You're magnificent, little one," he said softly. Keisha looked back at him with a grin that was part scared child and part determined warrior. "Grandma Rosie always said I was good with computers. But this is way cooler than her old laptop." Above them, the tide of battle was turning as Drakmor itself joined the fight. The battle above Drakmor raged for 4 hours, but it wasn't really a battle anymore. It was a masterclass in why ancient civilizations shouldn't be underestimated. Admiral Crix watched his mighty fleet crumble as Drakmor's awakened defenses tore through his ships like they were made of paper. Beam weapons that could slice through battle cruisers swept across the sky. Fighter drones moved with precision that made his best pilots look clumsy. And through it all, that impossible little human girl kept discovering new systems to activate, each one more devastating than the last. "Retreat!" Crix finally screamed, his pride shattered along with half his fleet. All ships, emergency jumped to hyperspace. The surviving hegemony vessels fled into the darkness between stars, leaving behind wreckage and the bitter taste of defeat. But something far more important was happening in the depths of space around Drakmor. In the control chamber, Keisha was staring at a display that made her heart race with excitement. Vorthak, look at this. The computer is showing new contacts, but they're not ships. They're dragons, Vorthak whispered, his ancient voice filled with wonder. Across the galaxy, every dragon who had hidden themselves away for centuries felt the awakening of Drakmor through quantum resonance patterns built into their very DNA. The fortress worlds were coming back online, which could only mean one thing: it was safe to come home. They came slowly at first, cautiously, like wild animals testing whether a trap had been set. But as word spread through the dragon networks that Drakmor was truly alive again, more began to arrive. Keisha stood at the entrance to Vorthak's cave, watching the purple sky fill with shapes that took her breath away. Dragons of every size and color descended through the atmosphere, their wings catching starlight as they circled the crystal mountains. Some were ancient like Vorthak, moving with the dignity of ages. Others were younger, their scales bright with colors she'd never imagined. There's so many of them, she breathed, unconsciously gripping Vorthak's claw for comfort. Not so many, Vorthak said softly. Once we numbered in the millions. Now. He counted carefully. Perhaps 300. But it is more than I dared hope for. One by one, the dragons landed in the great cavern, filling the space with their presence. Some eyed Keisha with curiosity, others with suspicion. A few seemed almost afraid of the small human who had awakened their most sacred fortress. An enormous female dragon with scales like polished copper spoke first. Vorthak the Ancient. We felt the awakening across half the galaxy. How is this possible? Vorthak gestured gently toward Keisha, who tried not to feel intimidated by all the massive eyes focused on her. This is Keisha Brooks. She is family. The word sent a ripple of shock through the assembled dragons. Family was sacred to dragons, more important than treasure or territory. But family had always meant other dragons. She's so small, whispered a younger dragon with blue-green scales. Small but mighty, Vorthak replied. She awakened systems that I had forgotten existed. She fought alongside me when enemies came. She chose to stay when she could have hidden. The copper-scaled female studied Keisha with eyes that held the wisdom of centuries. What do you want from us, little human? Keisha looked around at all the magnificent creatures surrounding her, feeling her heart pound with nervousness. But then she remembered Grandma Rosie's voice telling her to always be honest, even when it was scary. I don't want anything from you, she said clearly. I think maybe we could be friends. My grandma used to say that the best families aren't always the ones you're born into. Sometimes they're the ones you choose. 2 weeks later, the human resistance ship Freedom's Light dropped out of hyperspace near Drakmor, expecting to find either a destroyed world or a traumatized child in need of rescue. Instead, Captain Diana Torres found herself staring at something that changed everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. Ma'am, her communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's from Keisha Brooks. Put her through, Diana ordered. The main screen filled with the image of a confident young girl standing in a crystal chamber, with the massive head of a dragon visible beside her. But what really caught Diana's attention were the other dragons in the background, and the complex displays showing defensive systems that shouldn't exist. Hi Captain Torres, Keisha said with a smile. Dad told me about you. He said you were one of the good ones. Keisha, honey, are you all right? We came to take you home. Keisha looked thoughtful, then glanced at Vorthak. I'm home, Captain. But I was thinking, maybe we could invite more people to visit? I mean, the dragons have been alone for so long, and humans have been getting pushed around by the hegemony. Maybe we could help each other. And that was how the Human-Dragon Alliance began, with a 9-year-old girl who saw possibilities where others saw only problems. Within a year, human refugees were being welcomed on dragon worlds, while dragon technology was helping human colonies defend themselves. The hegemony still controlled much of known space, but now they faced something they had never expected. An alliance built not on conquest or fear, but on the simple idea that family comes in all shapes and sizes, and that sometimes the strongest bonds are forged between the most unlikely hearts. Keisha Brooks, the little girl who got lost among the stars, had found something better than the home she'd lost. She had found a future where humans and dragons could write new stories together, stories that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come.